I tell you what, that's pretty intimidating to stand up here after a president and a veteran of 41 years. But it is absolutely an honor to be here. So thank you so much. I know Madam President had to leave, but please pass her my appreciation to her and the entire Estonian delegation for the great support that they have provided for this conference. And we also had the Cyber Commanders Forum prior to this, where I believe we had 30 heads of the military cyber units from 30 different countries here. So it was an absolute honor to get to know them and spend time with them as well. To our charge, ma'am, thank you for being here. Admiral Rogers, all the generals and admirals that are here, and the powerhouse of academia. It's just impressive to stand up here and look out over this crowd. And I would also like to have a quick recognition for our Naval Academy midshipmen that are here and our West Point cadets. Truly the warriors of tomorrow. And so it's an honor to have both you groups here and part of this event. So ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of General Nakasone and the men and women of U.S. Cyber Command, thank you for the opportunity to address this distinguished forum. It is truly an honor to be back in Estonia. I was here just over 2 years ago, where I had the opportunity to participate in the Estonian Independence Day festivities, which are held in February. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not need sunscreen in February in Estonia, I promise you. But it was great, and our hosts were fantastic then, and they have, as I mentioned, been fantastic on this event as well. So my name, as mentioned, is Rear Admiral Trey Wheeler. I am the Director of Plans and Policy, the J5 at U.S. Cyber Command. As a career naval flight officer, I would admit I am not steeped in the background of the cyber domain like many of you in this room. So I'm certainly not going to try to impress you with a discussion about switches or routers or gray space or any of that kind of stuff. But I would like to take a few minutes to talk about U.S. Cyber Command, where we've been, what we're seeing now, and where we're going. So U.S. Cyber Command was established in May of 2010. So that's 9 years ago. And a little quiz for you. CyCon is how old? 11 years old, so it's older than U.S. Cyber Command. So May of 2010, and what we in the United States refer to as a sub-unified command, which really means that we're under the oversight of another four-star command, and that's good in that it allows that sub-unified command to mature and build and develop, and in our case, to develop our U.S. cyber force. At that time, exploitation and disruption activities comprised the major cyber threats to our nation's critical infrastructure, with our adversaries demonstrating effective but somewhat basic capabilities. U.S. Cyber Command was focused on defending the Department of Defense networks and supporting our geographic combatant commanders, specifically in Iraq and Afghanistan. The command was envisioned and originally designed as primarily a response force, supporting counterterrorism operations, planning to support conventional forces in a crisis, and maintaining the capacity to respond to an attack of significant consequence against our critical infrastructure. The U.S. Department of Defense proposed and received approval to establish 133 cyber units made up of both offensive and defensive teams to execute these responsibilities and defend our interest in the cyber domain. Over the next several years, U.S. Cyber Command remained focused on building these teams, ensuring the personnel, the equipment, the training was acquired to enable these teams to perform their mission. As we developed the cyber mission force, our adversaries continued to evolve. Nation states transitioned from exploitation to disruption to destructive attacks in cyberspace. We observed cyber assaults against our financial sector. We witnessed attacks against the Sands Casino and Sony Pictures. And we noted theft of security-related data from the Office of Personnel Management. Today, we are seeing what many refer to as a corrosive threat, the weaponizing of information to conduct influence campaigns, to include targeting of our domestic processes. Now, these various activities are not isolated hacks or incidents, but are strategic campaigns by nation states. We recognize the initial concept on which we developed those 133 teams back in 2010 had to mature. We had to adapt, and we could no longer be a response force. In the last year, General Nakasone has challenged U.S. Cybercommand, and with the support of the U.S. Department of Defense, to be more action-oriented, focused on producing results. Based on a few foundational concepts, we adjusted to an approach we refer to as persistent engagement, operating forward while adapting to the tactics, techniques, and procedures of our adversaries. Now, these foundational concepts are really quite straightforward. First, our nations are in constant contact with our adversaries. The adversaries are out there every day looking for our vulnerabilities. We cannot sit back and wait. We must engage. Second, our security is being challenged in cyberspace. Our adversaries are proficient, and we must actively defend. We must conduct reconnaissance. We must understand our adversaries' capabilities and their intent. Third, superiority in cyberspace is temporary. We may achieve it for a period of time, but it's extremely difficult to maintain. And fourth, the advantage favors those who demonstrate the initiative. To achieve an advantage, we must continuously improve our defenses, create new accesses, and upgrade our capabilities. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a period of great power competition. Our adversaries are operating below the threshold of armed conflict, but they are continuously operating. Just as the nature of cyber attacks have evolved, so too has U.S. Cybercommand. So we've matured from that response force to a persistence force, a force to operate forward. Operating forward. So being a sailor, the concept of operating forward resonated with me. I understood that. With our Navy operating forward, we're able to better understand the environment and gain insights that we simply could not observe if we remained in port. Our Navy operates forward to defend the sea lines of communication, which are critical to our global trade. It allows us to train and operate with our partners, sharing tactics, techniques, and procedures. So I believe many of these same concepts apply to our cyber forces when we use the concept of operating forward. So we have shifted our focus from simply building those 133 units, those 133 teams, to operating those teams, building readiness, capability, and capacity. We've learned traditional responses against those who have penetrated our networks, stolen our data, or defaced our websites must be refined. We've learned if we're going to have an impact, if we're going to change a behavior, we have to be persistently engaged. We must understand the adversary, and we must be able to impose cost. We've learned in cyberspace, it's the use of the capabilities that is strategically consequential. The threat of using something in cyberspace is not nearly as powerful as actually using it. So all of us in this room understand the global nature of the cyberspace domain. Our communications, our economies, our very livelihoods depend on our ability to protect and secure the domain. One in which the overwhelming majority of the networks, that critical infrastructure resides in the private sector. In the United States, the Department of Defense and U.S. Cybercommand have a critical role to play in the defense of these networks. We both enable the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation with information and intelligence to more effectively work with our private sectors. We are building critical partnerships with industry, academia, various agencies within our government, and critically important to many of you in this room. The U.S. defense strategy outlines partnerships as a key element for success. Operating and defending in the cyber domain is an ultimate team sport, and we are on the same team. So team. So a quick story, if I may. So as I was growing up, my home was right across the street from a public park, and in that park was a basketball court. So after school, every day, as soon as I got home, I headed to the basketball court, played basketball until it got dark, and then I would go home. I joined my first official team when I was about 10 years old. So this was the first time we had some really coaching. And our coach was really focused on the fundamentals, how to dribble, how to pass, how to shoot, and how to play defense. And on defense, he taught us a zone defense. So 2 guards, a center, 2 forwards. And the concept was rather simple, but it was fall back on your end of the court, set up in a tight zone defense, keep your hands up. When the other team approached you, you did your best to defend, but the key was when they shot, you were in a good position to get the rebound. You got the rebound, and then now you're on offense. Well, that worked good at that age with that level of skill set. But as I got older, the game got faster, the players larger, much quicker, much more fierce. The techniques of falling back into that zone didn't work quite as well. So our coach at that time preferred a much more aggressive defense. It was a full court defense. So as soon as the other team shot, we got the ball, we immediately went on the defensive. Hands up, being aggressive. In the opponent's end of the court. So the entire length of the court, you were on defense. We kept our opponent off balance, caused them to make mistakes. The approach was still defensive, but we were no longer waiting for them to come to us. It was a pressure defense, a persistent defense in the other team's space. So this approach required discipline, required good communications, and you had to have the right players to play. But at the end of the day, whether we won or lost, it still depended on how well we played together as a team. So ladies and gentlemen, being active, defending forward, engaging our adversary, and enabling our partners, our teammates, those are the elements which are the cornerstone of the persistent engagement strategy being used by U.S. Cybercommand today. Last fall, a team from U.S. Cybercommand and the National Security Agency supported U.S. European Command and the U.S. Northern Command, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to protect the integrity of America's 2018 elections. Several countries represented here today were also instrumental in supporting that effort. We very much appreciate the collaboration and the support from our international partners. If nothing else, that experience reinforced the concept of partnerships, of being a good team. We would not have been successful if not for the great work together, working side by side with all of our partners. So U.S. Cybercommand has evolved since it was established in 2010, 9 years ago. We work in a competitive space, and we understand we must continue to seek the tactical and operational and strategic initiative. Our persistent engagement approach must be closely tied with persistent innovation to ensure our accesses, our tools, our techniques, and our procedures keep pace. We must continue to recruit, train, mentor, and retain the best and brightest as we work to meld our intelligence and operations to achieve results. We must remain ahead of our adversaries in both knowledge and in action. And we must be good partners, which again is why I'm so very honored to be here with you this morning. It's truly humbling. It's an honor to be back in Estonia, and it's honored to be your teammate. Thank you very much.